Hey, welcome to X-Oriente, the new voice of brotherhood. I am half of your team, Eric Diamond,
I'm the other half of your team, Jason Van Dyke.
and we haven't done a show in a couple weeks. I think everybody deserves kind of an explanation. Part of it was because I had to go to London for business, and the idea was we were going to try to do a show. We thought, oh yeah, we're going to do a show from London. It'll be cool. It'll be remote. It'll be amazing. And it couldn't happen because the hotel that I was staying at had abysmal uh, internet access. Like the wireless was terrible, and not only was it bad, but I'm literally sitting in the hotel, and there's somebody in the lobby of the hotel trying to actively hack into my computer. And yeah,
Huh.
yeah, yeah,
Wow,
and yeah,
that's
and
disturbing.
extremely. Like every 15 seconds, I would get like, my little virus protecting thing would pop off and go, somebody's trying to hack you, and I'd be like, what the hell. So
That's that's unkind.
yeah, so I thought, I better keep all the internet activity to kind of a bare minimum. So
Right, right.
it couldn't happen, and then we got back and just in time for Yom Kippur. Um, and then last week you had something going on, didn't you?
I did. I had a friend in town.
Oh, okay.
Unexpectedly, had a friend who biked into town from Denver
On his bicycle or motorcycle?
on
Bicycle.
his bicycle.
Holy
Yeah,
wow.
he's in shape.
I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's fun. But I haven't seen him in a long time, so it was nice.
Okay. Well, listen. Before we get into the sort of the meat of the show, um, uh, we're trying to schedule for next week a really interesting guest. He's a Masonic software developer, and so we're going to try to get him on the show. That'll be really fun. And then also wanted to today I went and saw Blade Runner 2046.
I was gonna go see it today, and I didn't get around to it.
Go
I know.
see
Heard it's
that
amazing.
movie. Go see that movie. If you saw the first one, first of all, if you didn't see the first one, see the first one. See
Mm,
the final director's cut before you see
mhm.
it, because it'll make it better. Um,
It's one
but
of the best movies ever made.
ever made. And this one, it's and here's what's really funny. So like, because I've been doing a lot of international travel, like I spend a lot of time
Hmm.
on airplanes. And if you fly the same airline, which I do, you tend to see the same movies, because they change the movies every month or so. And so I must have watched Ghost in the Shell like 6 times. Because not because it's a great movie, it's not, but because like I will, like I said, I will watch Scarlett Johansson read the phone book.
It's a good
But
point.
yeah, but it was kind of cool, and while Ghost in the Shell is not a very good movie, in terms of like its script and stuff, it's kind of one of those weird like Chinese American British joint venture kind of things.
Hmm.
So it's one of those movies where they can't get, they have to be completely culturally agnostic because it's going to be dubbed into a bunch of different languages and stuff like that, which
Right.
I
Uh-huh.
think it's kind of an unfortunate trend in film right
Hmm.
now.
Hmm.
But
Right.
we're kind of stuck with it when you're paying that much money for a movie.
Hmm.
But it deals with a lot of the same themes, namely like what is it like, what does it mean to be human,
Hmm.
and how do we define what humanity is? And so from a Masonic perspective, and a philosophical perspective, it's a very interesting, it's kind of a very interesting question. So, I think that people who are thinkers in Masonry would really enjoy this movie, and just the everything. I mean, whereas Ghost in the Shell was kind of an interesting little scratch of the surface, Blade Runner goes all in, and it's
Yeah.
just way, just the amount of quality and everything from the script to the performances to the art direction to just the
That's great.
little details. It's just
Yeah,
freaking
I've heard
amazing.
nothing but glowing things about it, so I kind of can't wait. I will say this, because you mentioned, if you're a thinker, if you like that stuff, especially Masonic things to go and see the first Blade Runner. And I totally agree with that. I would also suggest you read the books. Philip K. Dick is the author. He's an award-winning science fiction writer. Dead now, died young.
Yeah.
But Dick is really, 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 really incredible if you read his stuff. Philip K. Dick was a paranoid schizophrenic. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. But he was a paranoid schizophrenic who really liked LSD. And so he would drop acid.
As one does.
Right, when you're paranoid schizophrenic already. You just need that extra little helping hand. But he would get into these really weird altered states, and he'd have these thoughts about, well, am I human, and why? And basically he would write off of these things, these conundrums that he would find himself in while in the depths of acid trips while he was a paranoid schizophrenic. But his books are mind-blowing because of it.
Oh, yeah.
Because they bring up really, really tough questions.
Yeah.
And it's really, his stuff is really, really good. It's very challenging, but it's really, really
amazing. And also the Man in the High Castle, if you haven't seen that.
Yeah, there you go.
One of my favorite TV series.
Yep.
Just absolutely brilliant. So he's sort of the darling of Hollywood, but it all started.
Yeah.
The whole fascination with Philip K. Dick started with Blade Runner back in the day, and it's really interesting when you look at the history of it, like how, as a film, it got kind of butchered because of Hollywood, and there's all these different cuts of it, but the final cut that Ridley Scott did is really the one that sets up this next movie, and so I highly recommend that if you're listening to my voice now, take a sick day at work if you have to. It's a 3-hour movie, so don't get one of those really huge Cokes,
Right, exactly. You're gonna hurt.
Yeah. All right, so we originally we were going to try to do the show last week, and last week was Yom Kippur for me, which it's a big deal holiday. It's probably the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. You fast all day, you atone. Actually, it's interesting. You don't really atone on Yom Kippur. You atone the 10 days before Yom Kippur, but Yom Kippur is the day that's sort of like your last chance to atone. They say that, God is judging you for those 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And then on Yom Kippur, the book is sealed. So as a result, we fast, it's almost like we're showing God, hey, look, we're serious. We're really, really sorry.
That, or how to cram for the exam.
It pretty much is cramming for the exam. It absolutely is. Yeah, for sure. And, and so, as part of that, me being the lover of liberal fake news that I am, there was a good editorial in the Sunday Times on September 29th, which was called "We Are All Jewish Now," like JEW-ISH. And so what was interesting about it was sort of like the author, who was Deborah Baum, was sort of questioning this idea of Jewish identity. And specifically, like when you look at people like Larry David, right, who considers himself, you put it this way, anybody who's ever seen Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I know you're a big fan of the show, he's like a super Jew, right? But from a religious standpoint, he's really not Jewish. I mean, he's not really observant, right? But he says in the article, there's not a day that goes by where I don't hear that word uttered, or I don't think of myself in that way. And so it reminded me of a discussion that I'd had at Masonic Week. And we were discussing, as one does at Masonic Week, we were discussing religion and politics. And one of the things that was talked about was this idea of Jews being a chosen people. And I said, well, that's kind of an interesting, it's a misconception. It's a really interesting one, right? Because for years, you know, I won't even say anti-Semitic, but anti-Jewish, Christians regarded that as sort of this act of hubris, that somehow Jews felt themselves better than everybody else. And that's, I can tell you from the inside, that's never been true. That's never been how Jews perceive it. Jews always perceive it as that Judaism is a burden, right? And so there's two stories that we tell. One is a humorous story where God goes to the Egyptians and says, I have these commandments, and I want you to follow them. And the Egyptians said, well, give me a sample of one. And God says, well, you can't eat pork. And the Egyptians were like, pork? We love bacon. We can't give up pork. Forget it. So God goes to the Greeks and says, I have these commandments. I want you to obey them. And the Greeks say, well, give me an example of one. He says, well, you can have no other gods but me. And they said, no, we love our gods. They're great storytelling by the fire. We would be loath to give those up. Forget it. And so finally he finds the children of Israel wandering around the desert, and he says to Moses, I have these commandments, and I want you to be my people and obey them. And Moses says, well, how much are they? And God says, well, they're free. And he says, great, I'll take 10. Right?
Oh, that's terrible.
But the idea of being chosen, right, is that you're chosen by virtue of the fact that you've been chosen to assume a burden, right, which is a burden of these commandments, right? You are under an obligation of in Hebrew the word is halacha, which means holiness, right? You're required to do certain things and not do other things, because God demands this of us, right? And so I was thinking about this, and I thought to myself, that's a lot like Masonry. Masonry is a lot like that, in that we take an obligation when we become Masons, and we don't just take one, right? We take three obligations to behave in a certain way. And that way is, we're admonished. And this is interesting, because I think, it's kind of like a graphic equalizer, right? So when I was a kid, like everybody's stereo had a graphic equalizer, and what you'd do is you'd push up the bass, right? You'd push down the mid range, and you'd push up the treble, right? And if you think of those three categories as like our degrees, right? We tend to emphasize the first degree, which is really a lot about secrecy. Yep, we tend to emphasize the third degree, which is sort of that spiritual component. We kind of downplay a little bit more on the second degree, maybe because it's sort of like a midway stopping point. But there's a lot in that degree about how we should, in terms of like how we should relate and discover truth, right? And so I was thinking about this, and I thought to myself, even more so than Jews, who by most Jews are born into their faith, right? So you don't really, I suppose you can choose, you can choose your faith, and that you can convert to something else, or you can decide, like Larry David, I'm not going to practice and stuff like that. That's fine. But Masons, unlike Jews and unlike pretty much everybody else, they assume this. They go into it willingly, right?
Sure. Absolutely. They seek it out.
Yeah. We're given an opportunity to get out anytime, right? We come to it of our own free will and accord, and we're asked and asked and asked and asked, more than 9 times, 10 or 15 times over the course of all of what we go through. Are you sure you really want to do this? Right. And we enter into that covenant, into that promise, into that obligation. And so my question is, here's the thing. As a Mason, I feel different, and it's changed my personal behavior in radical ways. And I'll give you an example of how that is. So growing up, I was always a Zionist, and I'd always affiliated myself with Zionist movements, right? And to me, I was raised to believe that Palestinians, Muslims, Arabs wanted to destroy us. They were the
Mm-hmm.
enemy,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was by a miracle of God. God was on our side during the 6 Day War and blah, 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 like all that stuff, right?
Sure.
And that was true for me. That was truth until I met my first Muslim brother
Mm-hmm.
and my first Palestinian brother and really kind of had a heart to heart conversation with them and was forced to keep an open mind about it because I made that promise,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Yeah,
he's a brother.
absolutely.
And that changed my political views and changed the way I saw Muslims and changed the way I saw Palestinians and changed the way I saw my relationship both to my cultural and ancestral homeland and also my relationship to the other people who live in that same space. And that's, like in a way, Masonry forced that change on me because
Yeah.
of my
Okay. So
obligation.
that's good. I mean, so going with that, I agree with that. I think that I think to start off by saying that even in religion, I think that people in general, human beings in general, seek the easy solution. And the easiest solution for us is to see things in black and white. This is good. This is bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we
Mm-hmm.
we we have an innate. We I shouldn't say it's an instinctual need to categorize and to put them in neat, orderly areas. We don't do well when things are blurry. And so what's really interesting about that is I think that how you say that, that Jews look at the religion as a burden. I see Masonry as a burden. You willingly take it on. And the thing is that it does exactly what you were just talking about. It forces you to look at things with an objective view. It forces you to shut up while somebody else talks about their strongly held beliefs that you don't believe in. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That you not just don't believe in, but maybe actively work against. And so that's tough. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to confront and to challenge your own, especially religious beliefs, um, in a way that is constructive.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that I think that Masonry blurs those lines. It really forces you into seeing things a little bit more blurred. It takes away some of those clear lines that you draw for yourself by using, the politics, the religion that you grow up with. And it forces you to look at both sides, and it forces you to say, all right, well, there are no absolutes. So if there are no absolutes, how do I navigate these things
Mm-hmm.
in a more reasonable and constructive way? Um, and that's really the key. It's a constructive way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a how do I move forward with everybody by and I think that's interesting because that's a burden. That's not an easy thing to do, and it's not an easy thing to take on. And so I totally see where you see the parallels.
Yeah. And I mean, here's my question for you: Is it? I think that Masonry has always had that distinction. Like back in the day
Sure,
when Catholics and Protestants were killing each other, prior to um, the I don't even know when it was, like the end of that civil war in Britain, when you
sure,
had the Whigs and the Tory, the Cavaliers
correct.
and stuff
Right.
like that. In those days, I mean, men were literally killing each other over religion, and here was a group of people who were like, we don't much care how you want to worship.
Right.
Keep it at a lodge, and let's, we're going to be brothers anyway, and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
be open minded about that. And so I feel like that sense of obligation has gone all the way back to the very, very beginnings of Masonry.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I really would. And I think that I think it's kind of funny because so I was watching. I can't remember what movie I was watching. It was a really stupid movie. I can't remember what it was. At any rate, the moral of the story of this this movie I was watching was kind of like Love Always Wins. Doesn't matter, love always wins. Which is the theme of countless movies.
Sure.
But when you really think about it, it's true. It always does find a way, because you look at these really, really heated conflicts. Northern Ireland is a good example of it. And you look at these conflicts, and the thing is that no matter how nasty they get, eventually people sit down and go, all right, this is out of hand. We need to find something that we can agree on. And then they find one thing, and then they find more, and then they find more, and then they find more. And then they figure out essentially, well, we're not that different, really. There are a couple things here or there, but I'll give it to you and we'll just let it go. And that's and in a lot of ways that is love. That's letting the positive overwhelm the negative. Although that's always the harder way to go about things. The negative is always easier. If you look at philosophy, look at our pal Rene Descartes. He found out that ripping things down is super easy to do. He could take down all of philosophy, all of the things that we know are true, and it was a relatively simple exercise for him, logically. Now, putting it all back together again turned out to be a giant pain in the ass. But it proves that negative is way easier than positive. It's much shorter. It's a much shorter cut. So, yeah, I'll buy that.
So, do you think that? I mean, do you feel differently when you go through your day-to-day life, when you read the paper, when you hear the news, when you talk with coworkers? I mean, maybe it's a little different for you because you pretty much work with brothers for the most part.
Right.
But like in your daily life, I mean, do you feel differently as a Mason? Do you feel like you're somehow different than everybody else, that you're somehow just a little bit of an outsider because of your Masonic affiliation?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Outsider, sure, absolutely. And I think that's because I tend to look at things, but well, I don't know. That's not fair. I don't think it's because of Masonry. In all honesty, I think it's because
you're a mutant.
No, right. That too. But no, I think of it's because I have a background in marketing and rhetoric, and so I know the tricks. And I can see them, and they're really obvious to me. And it's like, I know you're trying to manipulate me. I get it. I'm not stupid, and I've always been offended by that. Like it always angers me that you think I'm that dumb, that it's this easy to manipulate, to hit my emotions. And so I think of myself as different that way, because I don't let myself get twisted in knots about stuff that I find on Facebook and things like that. I find it easier probably than most people to let things go. As far as like, I made this screed on Facebook and I misspelled some words. I'm not going to go in and be pedantic ass and spelled, they're wrong. It's THEY apostrophe RE. And that's just, and so like, but Masonry certainly has made me much more aware, especially now that I work there, so I've got to eat, sleep, and breathe it. It has made me much more aware of find the balance, find the center line, because if you're not forcing yourself there, it's easy to fly off in either direction.
Tell me more. So when you say if you're not forcing yourself there, because that's a really interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, how do you feel about it? Because this is interesting. Because so I've always felt that if left to your own devices, if you don't have, I want to say a coach, right, or some sort of outside influence that's keeping you honest and saying like, you might want to doubt that. I know that you just had a big strong opinion. You might want to doubt that. And here's how you're going to doubt that. And here's how I'm going to challenge you. And if you're not willing to accept that challenge and say, fair enough. Let's really work on that and see if I am indeed wrong. And if you're not a big enough man to admit, hey, I'm wrong, even when you're not, sometimes you have to admit defeat when you really don't have to. It's you don't have to. I'm trying to think of a good example. A good example, it's like being married. Yes, you're right. I'm not going to fight the point anymore. We're all done.
So it's in the interest of harmony.
In the interest of harmony, you just back down.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that's a really hard adult lesson to learn, and Masonry has certainly helped me through that. And I think that it forces you to do that. Masonry forces you to look at things, and it says to you right away, like, don't hold these beliefs so tightly. Talk, think, tease those things out. And so I think it sort of forces that. Don't you feel that way? Don't you feel like you're being a bit that Masonry necessarily pushes you in that direction to kind of challenge those things?
Oh, completely.
For yourself?
Absolutely. And in fact, I'll tell you a very specific way that it kind of governs my behavior, mm-hmm. Especially like on Facebook and on the internet, because I am like Facebook controversy is like catnip to me. I'm one of those guys who if I'm always up for a good argument.
Sure, right.
But I find myself these days like only intervening when I see that there's kind of like a teaching moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So like,
mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. I got into a little bit of a dust up on Facebook. There was a thread about the Widow's Sons, which it was a group mm-hmm. that I was affiliated with. Mm-hmm. I did a show about it, a few years ago. And I said some things that were somewhat critical of the organization, and, they all closed ranks, and, it started to attack and stuff like that. And it would have been very easy for me to just say, you know what, see ya guys, but I felt like, no, you know what, I need to kind of stay engaged and not get into ad hominem attacks, not get into logical fallacies, but to stay engaged and just say, hey, you know what? Like, I get that we have these differences, but we're brothers, and we need to, we need to be able to discuss these things in a realistic and a viable way. And so that I find that governs a lot of my interactions on Facebook. And one thing that I find troubling is I feel like, and one of those things, like, when we see things like racism, and we see things like, people who are, they are super polarized, which I think in and of itself, personally, is kind of an anti-Masonic concept. Like, I don't believe that anybody should be, I don't see how Masonry is compatible with super polarization on either end. Whether mm-hmm. you're super liberal or super conservative, I think that Masonry is all about moderation and about seeing different points of view and being like, again, subduing your passions, right? And being able to kind of evaluate them in a critical way. So sure. Any kind of like extreme point of view, I find personally unmasonic. But we see a lot of that. We see in the fraternity, there's a lot of it. And there's a lot of, if you don't believe the way I believe, here's a perfect example. Like, so I think since the last time we actually fired up the show and we're having a discussion, how many posts would you say about kneeling around the flag have you seen? Right? On your Facebook feed? Like, way too many, right? And some of those were by brothers, and some, and it's funny. Like a year ago, I said, look, if you're gonna like, if this is gonna be your rhetoric, I'm gonna block you, right? And I've been doing that. I've been blocking people because this is like, to me, this is like a non-issue. Like it doesn't matter.
It is a non-issue,
right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like if this guy wants to do this, it's his
Mm-hmm.
right. Let him do it. Ignore it. If it offends you, just ignore it. You don't have to boycott the NFL. Just ignore it. It's going to go away. The more resistance you give to this, it gives more fuel to it, right? And I think that's sort of
Precisely.
I think it's one of the crises that we're facing now in our public discourse. Is
that we can't talk about it, like, and really, honestly, it's really easy. I think this is an issue that would be super easy to talk about with people, because there is an issue of respect, and at the same time, there's an issue of freedom of speech, the actual freedom of speech that's in the Constitution, which is this is the freedom of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't necessarily mean that you can be offensive and terrible and awful. That's not what it means. Freedom of speech is not the freedom of speech necessarily that people like Larry Flint fought for. The real freedom of speech, the thing that the founders of our country and the writers of our Constitution were really thinking about, is people kneeling in silent protest, where this is a piece of political speech and it harms no one. Zero. What it does is it shocks. It could offend in a way, but it calls attention to their issue. That's the freedom of speech working.
Well,
and the thing is that and that whole idea of you're disrespecting. Yeah, that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
That's what's going on here. Yes, you've got it. Congratulations.
But
the thing is that you didn't really hurt anybody with it.
Right. But I think what's worse about that is that this is rhetoric that is designed to inflame emotions.
Agreed.
It is designed to inflame passions.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
It is designed to get you all bent out of shape and like, I'm a veteran and people died for their, that's exactly what they want. And by they, who do I mean by they?
The Russians.
You're bad, man.
No, I am bad. I'm terrible. Terrible.
By them, I mean the people who are not committed to subduing your passions.
Correct.
Right? They are manipulating things that they know that we're passionate about. We are passionate about our patriotism. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? We're proud. We're proud. We're patriotic, and the best way to distract us from other things that are going on is to appeal to that passion and to fuel it. And if we fall for it,
and what's really funny is that we're proud, we're patriotic, and we're also very individualistic. We're really proud of our voices, and so it's an easy trap for us to fall into. But yeah, no, I completely agree. But I mean, no, it's what you said about being on Facebook and sort of moderating yourself there. I think that's great. I mean, it's challenging. It really is.
It is.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's when you have an opinion and you just desperately want to share it. And I try not to. I really try not to do anything on Facebook very much anymore. I post now once or twice a week at most, because it's one of those things you can let that become your life, and I see a lot of people that do, and that just, they live through that lens, and that lens isn't necessarily reality. It's not necessarily clear. There's a distorted view of reality there, because it's basically just everybody's chance at their own marketing. They can build their own marketing plan for themselves and put it out there. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
So that brings up a really interesting idea, right? And it's something that I'm going to talk about this, but it's not like I'm just caveating right now. It's not fully baked yet. It's just a feel. So one of the things about me is that I work in social media, right? That's my job. I'm a digital guy, right? I work in digital marketing. Right. I'm trying to, I study the ways in which people can be influenced by social media and stuff like that. And one of the things that I'm starting to understand is that we are quickly going into a realm of reality. Follow me here. I know this is going to sound really nuts, right?
No, I'm following so far. Yeah.
That we're not prepared for, right?
Yeah,
and so I'll give you an example. So last June, this is really funny because I actually have this. I documented it. So I keep copious notebooks. I have shelves and shelves of notebooks, and I was doing a presentation. One of the things that I have to do for my job is to create reports on social trends. And so one of the social trends that I was trying to report on was this idea of fake news, right? And I was looking at this really curious behavior by Mark Zuckerberg. And what Mark Zuckerberg was doing was he was like inviting himself to like family barbecues. He was kissing babies. I mean, this is a kid who, like, if you've ever watched Aaron Sorkin's, social media movie, I mean, Sorkin portrays him as like this far from being autistic, but sure. This is not a guy who's like a super people person, right?
No, he's not warm and fuzzy.
Right. Yeah. And here he is, like he's doing this like goodwill tour, and everybody's going, is this guy running for president? Right. And so I was looking at this and I'm like, why would he be doing this? Like, first of all, if I were Mark Zuckerberg, the last job I would want in the world would be to be president. Because as Mark Zuckerberg, he has a lot more world influence than Donald Trump or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton or George Bush ever.
And a lot more freedom.
Yeah, a lot more freedom. Like, he doesn't have a Congress to have to deal with, right? Yeah. He's just got his board of directors. So why in the world? So I kind of dismissed that whole presidential thing. And then I came up with what I thought was a horrible conspiracy theory. And this is I could tell you exactly when this happened. This happened on June 9th, right?
Okay. All right.
And the conspiracy theory I had was it kind of went something like this. And I can't believe I'm talking about a conspiracy theory on this show. Oh my God. But here's how this conspiracy theory went.
All right.
When you place an ad on Facebook, right? There's two ways that you can place an ad. You can either post something to Facebook and then boost it, which is what we do, right? So a lot of times, we're doing this show live. After the live session is over, I'll have the ability to boost it, and Facebook will be pestering me for the next 6 weeks, like, "Oh, you can boost this post, right?" And I'll spend $20 or $30, to boost it to people who are, interested in Masonry and speak English and stuff like that. That's a boosted post. The other more interesting kind of thing is called a dark post. And what a dark post is an unpublished post. So that's a post that you can send to whoever you want. You can target, and Facebook has very, very, very precise targeting tools, right? So I can target people who've engaged in certain kinds of behaviors. I can target based on demographics. I can target based on geography. I can target based on income level. I can target, there's a whole, like, interests, right? So I can target only Freemasons who own a home, who make a certain amount of money, right? Very, very precise targeting. But these posts are not published. So if you go to my page, you will not see those posts on my page. They're just sent directly to those people, right? And so if you look at Apple's a good example of how they do this. If you go to Apple's Facebook page, you'll find that Apple has a Facebook page that has roughly 500,000 followers or more, right? And 0 posts. They have no posts on the page because they only do dark posting, right? Now, when you dark post, there's 3 people who know the content of that dark post. The sender, the recipient, and Facebook. Right?
Right.
And so what I thought to myself is, what if the Russians, having hacked the DNC databases and the Republican databases, right, got all these. So what you can do is, once you have what they call a unique ID, which is like an email address, right? Once I have an email address, I can not only target you, but then I can go into Facebook and I can create what's called a lookalike audience. So what that means is that I can, so if I have your email address, right, I can look at your Facebook profile and I can say, oh, Jason likes the Brewers and he likes the Green Bay Packers and he likes Masonry and he likes, craft brew and he likes, all the things that you like. And then I can say, okay, I want to now target all the people who like the same things that Jason likes, right? Without having having their email addresses. Those are called lookalike audiences. Right? It's a very, very powerful marketing tool. This is one of the reasons why social media is such a powerful marketing tool.
Right.
And so now with the Russians having hacked all those email addresses, now they have unique IDs. They can not only target those people with whatever they want to say to them, right? But now they can create lookalike audiences of even more people who like the same things that those people like and target them with the same kind of messages.
Sure. Right.
And so I was just like, whoa, that is very disturbing, right? Because the law in this country says you're not allowed, if you're a foreign government, you're not allowed to do political advertising.
Yep.
But there's no way, unless Facebook knew that this particular person was a foreign agent, they would, there was no way that they would know who was buying the ad. And I can tell you, as somebody on the show who places ads, they don't ask me for any sort of certification, or, they don't say, are you a U.S. citizen or anything? No, nothing of the sort, right?
No, they take your money.
So my thought was like, okay, well, if the guy who's investigating, what's his name, Mueller, if Mueller investigating this figures out that Facebook was involved, it's going to be very bad for Facebook, because they're going to open themselves up for the possibility of additional regulation. And they're going to, and not just here, but in other countries, right? Europe takes a very dim view of this kind of stuff, right? So it's very bad for Facebook. It looks very bad. So that was sort of my rationale. So like, why is Mark Zuckerberg going on this like goodwill tour? Well, he's trying to be like, deflect the culpability that he now knows that, like, oh shit, we should have, sorry, didn't mean to swear, but oh dang, this happened, right? And so now
last week,
yeah,
he released all the logs,
right? And not only that, but like came out with a big Yom Kippur, like mea culpa, I'm really sorry, right?
Yep. Well, and that whole thing too is that I think you're probably right. I think that you're 100% right on that thing, and I think that that probably came from a better get out in front of this.
Yeah. If I were him, I would certainly do that.
What's crazy is it shows you how powerful that media is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredibly powerful and seductive, because you've got it all there at your fingertips, and wow. Hey, good for you for figuring that one out.
Yeah. So I called a couple of friends and brothers in the FBI, and I said, look, I know I sound like I have tinfoil on my head, but if this is useful, pass it on. I'm not taking credit for it. I had this thought. I thought it was a little nutty, but better safe than sorry. I reported it, and I don't know if it informed anything or didn't inform anything. I don't claim any credit for it, but it's entirely possible. And of course, now this is exactly what's sort of coming out in the press. So what does this have to do with what we're talking about? So what it has to do with is the fact that we are getting ourselves into this digital life that we don't fully understand what the implications are. We don't fully understand what it means or how we can be manipulated. And here's another example. So Apple, a couple of weeks ago, had their big, their big thing where they announced the iPhone 10, right? And what they said is like, look, you can you can now use this phone thing that projects a map of dots on your face, and I can now track your facial movements and map them onto an emoji and have, the poop emoji, mouth,
Right.
whatever.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's a very slim distance from a poop emoji to the talking head of the Prime Minister of Britain or the, some world leader saying exactly what you want them to say.
Sure.
And it would be very, very difficult to understand what the truth is.
You want to know what I thought of right away when I saw that, which is really funny? I thought immediately of, boy, do you think that the guys who work at Industrial Light and Magic, when they saw that poop emoji, whatever, and they were thinking, we could have done Tarkin so much cheaper.
Yeah.
Rogue One.
Yeah, they wouldn't have had to like put people in suits and put ping pong balls on their head and stuff like
So pissed, like we could have saved millions.
You're right.
But yeah, no, I mean, and the thing is that, but you're 100% right. I mean, we're if you look at the technology that we're getting, Facebook right now, one of the problems that I have with Facebook is that when I look at Facebook, I have to see it through the filter of this is marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It's personal marketing. It's how you want me to see your life, when it's very curated. And so everybody's always happy. Everybody's always successful until they're not. And then it's the worst thing that's ever happened in the world and they need all of your help immediately. And so, knowing that stuff now, we're so naive, because, well, I know I'm trying to put my best foot forward for people. We're so naive because we look at this and go, oh, they're doing this. Wow, I got to get my stuff in gear because, that is amazing. They're doing great things.
Right.
And you just buy it. You just eat this up because, it's personal. It's exactly what marketers look at when they say, like, listen, I could advertise to you all day and tell you that, this is a better soap than this because of X, Y, and Z features, but you might not buy. It might not matter to you. But if you've got your friend Eric Diamond, whose opinion you respect, say to you, "Now you really ought to try that soap. It's awesome." Well, maybe I try the soap, and that simple little idea projects into a whole lot more.
And Facebook did that at one time. Like a couple of years ago, they were doing these things like, oh, Jason Van Dyke also likes, Irish Spring soap or whatever, and people objected because they said, wait a minute, I didn't endorse Irish Spring soap. I may have liked it, but that doesn't mean you can take my
That's
like
right.
and use it in the service of your ad. Right.
That's
So
crazy.
here's the rub on this. And so like, I'm sitting here going, I'm a Mason, right? I have a duty to A, subdue my passions, and B, pursue truth.
That's right.
Right. So in an age where it's becoming more and more difficult to understand what is true and what is not true, how does that change my responsibilities just in things like navigating a Facebook feed?
Absolutely.
And it's scary. It's scary because we're not, as a fraternity, here's the thing. First of all, as a fraternity, this is the highest good that I think that we can do right now as a fraternity, because I don't think anybody else has as part of their raison d'etre, right? Their reason for being, the pursuit of truth and the subdual of passion like we do.
100%.
Right.
I agree.
And I guarantee you that if a bunch of brothers were sitting at the helm, at the highest levels of our government, we wouldn't be, rattling sabers at North Korea right now. Right. And here's the thing, like in the 1950s, there were many more of us at those tables. Right. And that Masonry did have an influence on their behavior. And so I feel like more than ever, like that what that does to me is it makes me feel different. It makes me feel that my responsibility just got a lot more serious and a lot more critical to the preservation of civilization. I mean, I know that that sounds grandiose.
Yeah, but no, yeah, absolutely. It is. No, it's good.
And I just feel like more than anything, that need to sort of say, it's really important that no matter what other people believe, that I understand what's true and what's just sort of propaganda, what's sort of, what's fake, critical
and
thinking.
That, right. And that is a responsibility and a burden that you bear as a Mason. That's part of your obligation. Obligations aren't easy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So I guess if you're listening to this, I would like to open it up to you. I mean, we've got a couple of people who've been attending the live session. We haven't really had, we had a couple of, someone asked if Masons dream of electric sheep. They might, but,
Really?
I'd put it out to the audience and I'd say, do you feel differently? Like given what's going on in the world, given what is, I mean, it's very easy to be cynical about things, and it's very easy to just sort of dismiss it or be polarized or take a side, given all the things that are going on. Do you feel that your status as a Mason forces you to think differently, to act differently, to regard what you hear and read differently, to talk about it with other people differently? Does it make you feel different? Because it makes me feel different. I think it makes you feel different as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I just wonder, like, are we just a couple of guys with pointy heads, just talking about this, or
Sure.
is this real? And I hope it is, but I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of Masons who are just, falling in step with the, with the fake news and with the, allowing their passions to be inflamed and to kind of, go off in that direction. There are others who don't. There are others who get very indignant in the other direction. I mean, I see it I see it on both sides. I see polarization on both sides, and I feel like as Masons, our responsibility is to resist that. And I think one of the ways that we can do that is simply showing up. Right. And so I've been thinking about this a lot, and I was thinking about it because when I was in London, I stopped by the one of the duty-free stores and I picked up a paper calendar. And I was thinking about this and I realized, like all the things that go into my calendar is on my phone and it's digital and it just vanishes, and like, if you think about a guy like George Washington or Teddy Roosevelt or Harry Truman or,
Sure.
Robert E. Lee or, any personages in history, they left a legacy. They left their letters. They left their, these documents that we know them by. And today, that's all digital. And that all just sort of goes out into the ether and it's all ephemeral and it all just, disappears. And what is there left? Right. And so I'm kind of, it's weird, but like, as this guy who's been digital my whole life, my whole, working life, I'm starting to see the limits of it and I'm starting to see the dangers of it. And I'm starting to realize, one of the, I'm not giving too much away, but one of the conceits in the Blade Runner movie is they have this event that happens sort of in between the first and the second movie called the Great Blackout. Right. And it just, like there's this event and they don't really ever explain it, but like, there's just this event that kills all digital information.
Right.
And so they were like, who knew that only things on paper would survive? I mean, isn't that crazy? But, and so I thought to myself, what am I leaving behind? So where this is going for me is that I feel like I feel like, you know, part of what makes Masonry different is that we have to show up. We have to show up to lodge. Like Masonry happens in a closed room in person, right? I mean, I appreciate the idea of an internet lodge, but I'm sorry. Like internet lodge is a poor substitute at best.
Correct.
Real Masonry happens inside a lodge. It happens because you showed up. It happens because you closed the door and you open lodge with ritual. And, you know, like even in a crappy business meeting, you know,
100%.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're creating that working space, right? So part of Mason, you know, one of the things that's, I think, unique about Masonry is that it can't real. I mean, for all of our digital everything, and this show included, Masonry itself lives inside of a lodge, and we have to show up, right? And we have to participate in person, right? And when we do that, and I would sort of say that, like, when we do that, that makes us feel differently, and it makes us different from everybody else.
Yeah, 100%. No, that it's perfect, and I think that's a good place to end it. I think that's a really good place, because that's exactly right.
So listen, this is kind of a weird. Oh, so this is interesting. So Chris Bessemer, he said, I'm sure this discussion was had 200 years ago when people thought we shouldn't keep paper records in fear of it getting in the wrong hands. It's a reputation of the same discussion. I think he meant repetition.
Repetition. Yeah.
Repetition of the same discussion. I think it is, but aren't we lucky that we have those records? Right. And you know, one of the things that's really cool is if you ever get to London, and I urge you all to do it, and go to Freemasons Hall on Great Queen Street, to their library. Their library is just the library. It's you know, it's interesting. I thought it would be much grander than the Scottish Rite Library. Right? It's not. It's about the same size, but their archives are really extensive, and they have tremendous amounts of records that, you know, are just not like on the floor. And it's those records that really are critical to our understanding of Masonry today. So I think that paper records are important because it lets us know, you know, it's like we only know Washington by the letters he wrote. You know, we only know these great men who were Masons by the correspondence that they kept, because everything else is gone.
Sad. They'll only know me by my texts and the
but they won't.
The obscene gifts I left other people.
But that's the thing, they won't, because we'll never, you know, like we'll never see them again, right?
No, it's totally true.
Cool. Well, anyway, just a couple of bits of housekeeping. You know, again, we want to thank our executive producers. You make this show possible. We've got some really interesting things that we're cooking up, and as work schedules and things. Yeah. So Chris says, people will know Jason for terrible reasons, not utter on this family podcast.
Not to be uttered on this family podcast.
Yes, well,
correct.
You have a fan club.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Ruly's a member of Potomac 5. We forgive him for all.
Yeah. So, anyway, if you'd like to support the show, if you like what you hear, please consider supporting us. It's, we have a Patreon page. It's, www.patreon.com/X-Oriente. Drop us a line and tell us, what you think of the show. We like all feedback, good feedback, bad feedback. It's all good. It all helps improve the show. Especially, on this episode, let us know. Do you feel differently? Being a Mason, does it govern your everyday conduct? Do you feel differently from the people around you because of your obligation, because of the ring you wear, or because of the decal on your car? We really do want to know. Let us know. Drop us a line at xoriente@gmail.com and let us know. And stay tuned. Next week we'll have hopefully a really awesome show for you. Anything else?
No, that's it for me. Happy Feast of Tishri to everyone coming up this week at a local Scottish rite near you.
There you go. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye, guys.